Hey everyone, as you can see, I'm at Venetian's new poker room, which is actually at Palazzo. I'm currently on the wait list for 2-3. There's a max buy-in of 600. I'm going to buy in for 600. Hope you guys enjoy. Please like and subscribe, and here we go.
This is the first recordable hand of the evening. It folds to me in the cutoff position, and I look down at ace-2 offsuit. I tell you, I've had some interesting situations pop up with this hand over the past couple of sessions. It's definitely not a strong hand, but in this scenario, as it folded to me in the cutoff, I think it's a playable hand from time to time, and in this situation. Regardless, I opened for 15 bucks, and the small blind is the only caller, so I think his range is probably going to be relatively tight here, given his position. He could have pocket pairs, potentially high suited connectors, or a couple of Broadway cards. We're heads up to a flop, which is 4-4 queen with 2 clubs. The small blind checks, and I put out a feeler c-bet here of $15, hoping to take the pot down right now, or at least get some information on this guy, and he ends up making the call. So it's possible he has a queen or maybe an overcard like a king or an ace, or he could be on a club draw. The turn is the king of clubs, so the front door flush gets there. The small blind checks, and I think at this point there's a lot that he could have connected with on the board, so I make the check as well. The river is the 3 of hearts. The small blind checks, so now he may not actually have connected with the board at all, but it's certainly possible he has a queen and was scared of the king, or possibly a low pocket pair. So I check as well, and he ends up showing ace-jack of diamonds, and we actually split the pot. Didn't really earn anything in this hand, but with the way the board ran out, I'll definitely take the split. Okay, in this hand I'm in the cutoff position, and I look down at pocket sevens. The undergun raises to $15. It folds to me and I make the call. Hope to do some set mining here. The undergun's range is generally going to be pretty tight. Could be anything from premium pocket pair to possibly ace-jack or better. We're heads up to a flop, which is 9-king-9 with 2 clubs. The under the gun player checks, so I don't think she's got a super premium hand here like aces or kings or ace-king. But I check as well, looking to see if I can boat up here on the turn for free. The turn is the 3 of clubs, so the front door flush gets there. The under the gun checks, which is interesting. Maybe she's got something like ace-jack or ace-queen or maybe a smaller pocket pair. I'll put out a feeler bet of $15 and she makes the call. I don't think she's got the flush, and I don't think she's got a king or 9 either because of the way the hand's been played so far. So I'm thinking at this point she likely has a pocket pair. The river is the 9 of diamonds, so now I boat up, but not the way I was expecting, that's for sure. This time she leads for $20. This is such a small bet in relation to the size of the pot. I think I have to make the call here. So that's what I do, hoping that she doesn't have like pocket 10s or 8s or something like that. And she actually shows pocket 6s, and I take this one down. In this hand, I'm in the big blind, and I look down at queen 8 offsuit. It folds around to the button, who limps. The small blind completes, and I make the check here. No real reason to bump this one up. We're 3 ways to a flop, which is queen 9-7 rainbow. The small blind checks. I check to the limper on the button, who could literally have any 2 cards except maybe premium ones, and he bets 10 bucks. Small blind quickly folds, and I'm definitely calling here with my top pair. Pretty weak kicker. The turn is the ace of clubs. This shouldn't really change much here. The button likely would have put in a raise pre-flop had he had an ace instead of limping. I check to the post-flop aggressor, and he ends up checking as well. So I'm thinking he either hasn't connected with the board or he's got something like bottom pair. The river is the 3 of clubs. This time I lead for $20 and the button folds, so I take this one down. Small pot, but I'll take it. Okay, in this hand I'm in the big blind and I look down at king 10 of diamonds. The middle position player limps, the low jack raises to $10, the cutoff calls, and it folds around to myself, and I make the call with my suited broadways here. The middle position player calls as well, so we are 4 ways to a flop, which is 4-8 queen rainbow. I check, the middle position player checks, and the low jack bets $15. He's betting into several opponents, so he has to be representing some strength here. Could have something like ace queen or king queen or maybe a pocket pair. I don't think he's got kings or aces given his opening raise pre-flop was a little on the small side. Regardless, the cutoff folds and I make the call here. I've got some back doors, including a backdoor royal flush draw. Not very likely, but fun to think about. The middle position player makes the call as well, so we are 3 ways to a turn, which is the 9 of spades. Okay, my flush potential is now gone, but I do have a gutter to a straight now. I check. The middle position player checks, and now the low jack bets $30. This is a pretty decent price given the size of the pot. I don't have that many outs. 4 jacks get me there, but I'm not sure a king would help me here. It's possible the low jack's got king queen here, so in the long run, I don't think it's worth staying in, so I make the fold. The middle position player ends up calling the $30. The river's the 4 of clubs. Both the middle position and low jack players check, and the middle position player shows queen 10 of hearts and the low jack mucks. Pretty interesting. Thinking maybe the low jack might have had pocket jacks here. Speaking of pocket jacks, in this hand, I'm in the middle position, and I look down at, jack of diamonds, jack of spades, yes sir. I opened for $15, which is my standard open in a 2-3 game. The small blind is the only player to make the call, so we are heads up to a flop, which is king, king, jack, rainbow. Okay, I think I'll take that flop. And the small blind leads for $15. Now I don't want to set off any alarm bells by raising here, so I make the call. The turn is the 10 of clubs. The small blind leads again, this time for $25, and at this point I consider putting in the raise. About 50-50, but I end up making the call. The river is the queen of spades. This time the small blind checks, so it's unlikely she's got a king here, and I decide to go for some value, or at least make it look like I'm bluffing. So I put in a pot-sized bet of $110, and she thinks about this for a solid minute and ends up folding. She ends up showing the queen of clubs, and I show my pocket jacks, which at that point I thought it qualified for the high hand promotion, and that's why I showed it. But there was actually a higher hand that hit during that half hour, so I didn't qualify. But at least I took down a decent sized pot here, so I'll take it. Okay, in this hand I'm in the big blind position, and I look down at ace-9 offsuit. The under the gun player raises to $15 and it folds all the way around to myself, and I make the call. Need to proceed cautiously here as he's representing some significant strength raising from that position. So we are heads up to a flop, which is ace-4-5 with 2 diamonds. I check to the aggressor and he ends up checking as well. So that's telling me he likely doesn't have an ace here. I'm thinking he could have a pocket pair of anything from like kings all the way down to sixes or something like that. The turn is the 10 of clubs. So I'm likely pretty solid here with my ace. I put in a bet of $15 and he ends up making the call. So now I'm thinking he's likely on a flush draw. He probably would have folded a pocket pair with that ace out there. The river is the 5 of hearts. This time I put out a bet of $35 and he quickly folds. So yeah, very likely he had something like king queen or king jack of diamonds. So I take this one down. In this hand I'm in the big blind again and I look down at jack-9 offsuit. The middle position player limps and it folds around to the small blind and raises to $13. I call here with my unsuited 1 gapper and the middle position player calls as well. So we are 3 ways to a flop, which is 6 jack 8 with 2 hearts. The small blind checks, I check as there's still a player to act behind me, and the middle position player checks as well. The turn is the 2 of diamonds. This time the small blind leads for $20. I don't think the small blind has ace jack or king jack, or he would have led post flop, but it's still possible he has a better jack than I do, like queen jack or 10 jack, or he's got like a pocket pair of 10s or maybe an 8, but I doubt he'd raise from the small blind with something like 8-9. I make the call with the plan to proceed carefully, and the middle position player folds. The river is the queen of clubs. This time the small blind checks, and I check as well, still a tad worried he has a better jack. I show my jack-9 and he mucks, but he did tell me he did have an 8, so I guess he did in fact raise pre-flop from the small blind position with something like 8-9, so he was playing pretty loose there. Okay folks, buckle up for the pre-flop action in this hand. I'm in the cutoff position and I look down at king jack of hearts. There's a $6 under the gun straddle and it folds around to the hijack who calls the $6 straddle. I call the straddle, the button calls, the small blind raises to $16. The big blind calls the $16. The under the gun folds. The hijack calls the $16. I call the 16 and the button calls. Whew. That's a mouthful. So we are very multi-way into a flop, which is 3 jack 8 with 2 clubs. The small blind checks, the big blind bets $50, the hijack folds, and I call the 50 with my top pair, pretty decent kicker. The button folds and the small blind makes the call. So the pot is over $230 and we are 3 ways to a turn, which is the 4 of spades. Small blind checks, the big blind checks, and I check here for a bit of pot control. I don't think one of these guys has a set, or they definitely would have bet here. The river is the 7 of diamonds. The small blind checks, the big blind checks, and I check here as well. A tad worried someone has ace jack, but in hindsight, I think an ace jack would have probably bet here on the river. Regardless, I show my king jack, and the big blind shows king jack as well. The small blind mucks, and the big blind and I split the pot. In this hand, I'm in the low jack position. I look down at pocket kings. Oh yeah. I open for $15 and it folds around to the small blind and makes the call. We're heads up to a flop, which is 4-9 jack with 2 hearts. Small blind checks and I put out a C bet of $15 with my overpair and the small blind makes the call. The pot is $63 and the turn is the jack of clubs. This time the small blind leads out for $20. Given 2 of the 4 jacks are already accounted for, I don't think he's got a jack. Plus, this bet is pretty small in relation to the size of the pot, so I'm not quite sure what he's got here. So he's shown the ability to lead into the aggressor, and he didn't do that post-flop. So that's telling me he likely didn't hit a set or even has a jack here. It's possible he has something like pocket 10s or maybe 9-10 or something like that. I make the call a bit confused here. The river is the ace of clubs. This time the small blind leads for $25. Again, a really small bet in relation to the pot. He must have something like 9-10 or a pocket pair here. I make the call and he does in fact show pocket 8s. I show my kings and I take this one down. Kind of strange how this one played out. Okay, in this hand there's a $6 under the gun straddle and a $12 double straddle on the +1 position. The middle position player raises to $24. It folds around to myself and I make the call here. A case could be made to put in the raise, but the middle position player who's first to act represented some significant strength, initially raising a double straddle here. So I make the call. The under the gun player folds and the +1 makes the call as well. So we are 3 ways to a flop, which is ace 5-8 with 2 spades. I check, the +1 checks, and the middle position player bets $75. I'm not going anywhere with my top pair, pretty good kicker, so I make the call and the +1 folds. The turn is the ace of clubs, alright. It's now very unlikely the middle position player has an ace at this point. I check to the aggressor and he ends up checking as well. I'm likely pretty good here. I'm thinking he may have something like pocket kings or jacks. The river is the 10 of hearts. This time I lead for $125. Try to go for some value. He thinks about this for a solid minute. So now I know I'm good here and hoping for a call, but he ends up folding and I take this one down. Okay, at this point I've been card dead for a solid 30 minutes and I look down at ace 3 of hearts from the button. There's a $6 under the gun straddle on and the +1 opens for $12. It folds to myself and I make the call. I'm in position and the under the gun player calls as well. So we are 3 ways to a flop, which is jack 3 queen with 2 clubs and 1 heart. The end of the gun checks, the +1 bets $20, and I've got a piece of this board plus a backdoor nut flush draw, so I make the call, and the under the gun player calls as well. The turn is the 4 of hearts. Alright, so I still have the nut flush draw here. The under the gun player checks, and the +1 bets $40 this time. I make the call. It's a good price, especially if the under the gun player makes the call as well, which he does. The pot is over $200 and the river is the 2 of clubs. Alright, so I'm pretty much done here. The under the gun player checks, the +1 checks, and I check as well. No way I win this one with my pair of threes. +1 shows the nut flush with the ace 5 of clubs and takes this one down. Not sure why he didn't bet here, but okay. Okay, this is the final hand of the evening. I'm in the low jack position and I look down at pocket kings. Yes, sir. Again, from the same position too. I open for $15. The cutoff makes the call and the button makes the call as well. There are 3 ways to a flop, which is 7-5-5 with 2 diamonds. I decide to be a bit more aggressive here and lead for $20. Cutoff gets out of the way and the button makes the call. His range is going to be a bit more wide here, so he could have anything from like 7-8, a small pocket pair, or possibly even something like ace 5. The turn is the 9 of diamonds. I now have a backdoor second nut flush draw here to go with my overpair, so I lead for $50 and the button folds. So I take this one down.
Well, I didn't lose money, so that's a positive. I played for 6 hours here at the Venetian, in for 600, out for a whopping 602 for a profit. $2, I think. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.